So, in terms of the work that you do a lot of different things. How did you fall into this line of work?
So I studied food. I lived in Italy for 7 years, and I studied at the Slow Food University, which is all about good, clean, and fair food, and looking at food heritage, food science, food culture. And I also did my master's in food design. And in between that time, I had a miscarriage, and I hadn't really thought about my body before that. And it's only from that experience that I suddenly thought, I was forced to connect with my body through that experience. And it's only through that experience that I realized that the experiences that we go through, at least this was my truth, with our wombs, impact every area of our lives. And so it was from my experience that I thought there is a lack of support and knowledge that really connects with people out there. And I think I started this as sort of like my own healing journey, and then realized that this is interesting and necessary, and how I want to be of use in my community, because there weren't that many women, especially around me at the time, that I could see that were talking about this, especially Black women, women of color, queer people as well. And so I'm very grateful, especially I think we've connected over Instagram, that we are a lot more visible, and that people can see us, and that we can have these conversations. Like, if I thought about this 6 years ago, I'd never imagined that I'd be talking about periods with you on a Friday morning, or doing the work that I do. So I think like that's how I came into this world of like womb and periods and abortions and reproductive and sexual well-being and growth, I guess.
I've never encountered an abortion and miscarriage doula before. And I know that when I had a miscarriage, I would have loved to have used a service such as this, because I was lost and I felt like I just couldn't at that time. So this is about 7 years ago, that it was still something that wasn't really discussed. And now my thinking is so much different on it. And I talk about it a lot. Because it's just, it's something that just happens and we can't sweep it under the carpet. But how does your work, how do you connect with people? How would someone be able to even access your services?
So I'm mostly active on Instagram. My website is coming. I've said that for the past 2 months, but it is. But most of the people I've worked with have been through Instagram and through word of mouth, because it doesn't pay my bills, and I didn't start it as a service to make money. It's more sort of, I know I need to maintain myself, but that's why I do such a range of things, because each of them like fills my heart a bit, and so my head, and I'm learning and I'm supporting. And so for now, I'm happy like that. I'm looking to make more resources so that people can support themselves if they don't want to speak to me. But yes, that's how everyone's come to me, and the support for each person is different. With miscarriage, sometimes it's a few months or even like a year down the line that people get in touch with me, because I think, at least for me, that was if I look at from the day it happened to when I started to feel back to myself, that was almost a 2-year process, which I think for some people that maybe haven't experienced anything like that sounds a bit crazy, but that's how it is for many people. And a similar sort of time scale with abortion, although some people would get in touch maybe before if they're planning, because they just need to talk it out with someone. Both of them are intimate experiences, and although you may have a good support network around you, sometimes it's nice just to speak to someone that's completely outside. And I just want to say, I never offer advice on what should be done. I'm very much a listening ear. And as a doula is in the birth sense or postnatally, it's someone, in case anyone didn't know, it's someone that's there to support emotionally and physically. And that's what I do with abortion and miscarriage. And a lot is talking, because I think talking is very therapeutic, but it's more tailored to help people also feel in touch with their bodies as well.
So if I was to get in touch with you for, say, an abortion or after an abortion or a miscarriage, can you just talk through step by step how the process would work?
So I always do an initial 15 to 20 minute call with someone just for them to tell me where they're stuck and what they need and their story. And that's for me just to listen and to explain my services. And then from there, I will always write a follow-up email of this is how I can help. Because I think also, I think it's a two-way street. Like we said when we started this call, it's nice to see someone and connect with someone. And I always leave space for if they don't feel they connect with me. And also for myself, if I don't feel I connect with them. And so that initial call gives me time to also see, do they need help maybe from an actual therapist? Is this bigger than what I'm able to support with? How I can help them if I can't, to signpost them. And also for them to have a chance to sit with, is this the type of support I need? And do I want it from Zachi? So then I send up a follow-up email, and I usually structure it because actually most people I've worked with has been through Skype or Zoom, just because of people in Cambridge, people up in Manchester as well. And you can't sort of organize a 1-hour meeting every week or whatever it is. And then from there, I'll see what the needs are. So when it comes to abortion, if it's just, maybe it might be 1 or 2 calls before an abortion, like how can I prepare myself mentally? How can I prepare myself physically? For many people after abortion, I suggest a 4-week program that I do, which consists of 45-minute to 1-hour calls weekly. And it's a chance for them to talk as well as for me to share exercises and to practice these exercises of getting in touch with their body. So it's I have a sort of skeleton and then adapt it to people's needs, whether they're pre, post, how post, whether it's just a listening ear or whether they need maybe more support in connecting with their bodies. And I like to keep that pretty flexible because it's such a personal and intimate experience that I can't say this is the course and follow it and it's a 6-week course and by the end of it you'll feel like this. So for many people it's 4 weeks, then some people we extend to 6 weeks, some people I'm still in touch with but we've become friends. So it's a whole mix of experiences and people.
It must be so fulfilling, the work that you do, seeing the change that you can elicit in people through just the questions you ask and the structure, the tailored structure that you provide.
Yeah, it's sorry, I'm a bit at a loss for words. When I think about it, I actually feel quite emotional and also quite sad that it is not a common service. And I know that services are stretched, and I know that after miscarriage and abortion, sometimes, not even all the time, you're offered counselling, but it's so generic. And I think I know it goes deeper than book a few phone calls with an NHS counsellor. So I'm very happy I do what I do, but I think I would love to find ways, and I am working with people to find ways to make it more accessible in terms of that this is something that is so normal in our community that you can speak to someone. And I would also say that there are a lot of doulas out there that do this work, but maybe don't. To anyone that's looking, I would say for support around this, of course, do get in touch with me. But if you don't vibe with me as well, reach out to other doulas and look for doulas, because some of them, it might not be the first thing you see on their website, but a lot do offer abortion support, maybe not like I do, but there are a growing number of resources, and it's still not that much, but we are growing in this area of support, and I hope to see it flourishing because it's very much needed. I mean, these experiences sometimes impact us years down the line, but like even speaking to women like from 10, 20, 30 years ago, they've had a miscarriage or an abortion, and it's still this stuck energy in them, and it's impacted on relationships, children, parenthood, how they feel about their own bodies. It's impacted on sex. That's how I got into talking about sex and pleasure, because I realized that these experiences can impact us sexually, like even feeling sexual for yourself, even like some people can't touch themselves for ages or indefinitely after, and all of this is connected. Your self-esteem, how you feel at work, your mental health. And that's why I think that it should be a key part of reproductive health services, I think.
And you mentioned your work as a sex and pleasure educator. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I run workshops, womb workshops. I took on panels. I'm creating programs for schools now as well. And yes, so I came about it in a sort of roundabout way, but I realized, like with period education, that sex education, I did a course a little while back, and I said to the tutor, it was a sex educator's course, and I said to the tutor, but you like, there's no talk about pleasure in any of this. And it was a really great course. It was a fantastic course. And they were like, yeah, we don't really talk about pleasure. And I was like, how can you not talk about pleasure when actually I think like focusing it from that angle, which is why the main reason that many people are sexually active with themselves, with partners, is for pleasure. And if we, again, for me, it's like with period talk, we don't talk about the range of what is normal within a period or the range of experiences. I think if we're doing a huge disservice, especially to young people, if we negate that is a huge factor of sex. And I think coming at these issues, arguments, for want of a better word, from just a very base level, which is something that we don't often do, can increase engagement and education and learning so much more. And I realized that I've worked mostly with adults and older people talking about this, and I realized that many people have never spoken about pleasure. And I'm like, wow, you're like 50 and you've never spoken about pleasure, but you've been having sex for like the past 30 something years and you've never. It's like, no, I've never thought of pleasure. It's like, whoa, okay, like we really need to have this conversation. Like we really need to have these conversations.
Why do you think sex and pleasure have been so divorced from each other in terms of education, and even like think about education that we get around sex in schools? Why do you think those conversations have been so separate?
I know it's because sex education is tricky in terms of society, in the sense that especially with young people, it's about keeping STIs low and teen birth rates low. And so I think the fear is, if you talk about pleasure, you're telling them that they should have sex because it can be pleasurable. And so I think that there's a fear, and maybe people haven't found the right way to both educate and please the schools and parents of talking about pleasure. And I think those are the two main fears of teachers, school governors, school boards, the general education sector of, no, we can't talk about pleasure because then young people want to do it. Like, young people will want to do it anyway. So if they're going to do it, at least like let's give them the tools to communicate. And talking about pleasure is not just so that young people have better sex. It impacts communication. If you know what works for you, you can communicate that to your partner, and you can also communicate when things aren't working for you. So it filters down into, from what does pleasure mean to me, from like looking at erotic material, from porn to communication to body literacy. It encompasses all of that. It's not teaching young people how to have better orgasm. No, we need to move forwards from that point of view. So that's what I hope bring to the table.
And you mentioned, looking at erotica material and porn. Do you think that once you've done, like, have you seen examples of where you have been doing this education work and it's shifted the way that young people think about sex, away from this kind of what you see in porn to a more realistic depiction of sex and pleasure?
I think because yes to your answer. I think because we don't talk about it, so young people's go-to is porn or social media, when actually, like, we could even have discussions about, okay, like erotic material, like what about reading a book? And I'm not talking 50 Shades of Grey. There are many like erotic literature, or